Mama, 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 watch me, watch me. Ever heard that before? Or that you're in the middle of a busy day that's already stressful enough and trying to get school done with your children when your husband calls and says, sweetheart, would you please just, and then add something brand new to your list that is totally unexpected. How about, have you ever been doing school with one of your children and they suddenly make a demand of something that they just feel like they've got to do? I remember one day when my 13-year-old skateboard son began and said, I have got to go work on that skateboard trick. Mom, please, please, I can't concentrate. And then 15 minutes later, he comes back in and says, we have got to do school. When are we ever going to do school? Hi, I'm Jan Smith from Louisiana, and I want to talk with you today about the demands that are on us as moms, as a woman in general, and then as a wife and a teacher. Because if you add in to those responsibilities anything for church or social life of any sort, and it can feel overwhelming, even chaotic, maybe fearful. And I want to help you to learn to manage your fear, even in the midst of the chaotic time of homeschooling. In order to be healthy, we must banish guilt and comparison. Have you ever had a case of the shoulda, woulda, couldas? I know that my husband would regularly, when I would say I should have or I could have, he would say, no, shoulda, woulda, couldas. And so eliminating guilt, God does not require of us to be perfect. He wants us to be faithful. And so I encourage you to focus on that and to not allow guilt to be a part of it. Guilt is from the pit. Now, if you are truly repentant of something, that maybe you're doing something that you are spending too much time on Facebook and neglecting other things, or every night watching too much Netflix or something like that, then that is not, that should be a conviction, something that the Spirit of God is convicting you of. But walking around with guilt or shame, that's not of God. That's from the pit. And eliminate that from your feeling bank. Another thing that causes frustration and a feeling of failure and an unhealthy mindset is that of comparison. Because we often, when we do compare, we compare our weaknesses with somebody else's strengths. Maybe you're very athletic and you love playing outside with your children, and yet you come in and you see a new Facebook post and you were feeling great about things, and you see that one of your friends who's very artistic has suddenly just repainted her kitchen table in a brand new color, and it's just all looks so great. And you look at yours and you go, wow, I can't even imagine doing something like that. Don't compare your weaknesses with someone else's strengths. One of the problems that I had, even though I was busy with my children and I was giving it 100%, then sometimes we compare our family's achievement with another family, something that maybe God hasn't called us to. I think about a friend of mine from Lake Charles in South Louisiana. She and her husband were both engineers, and she was at home homeschooling her children. And as they got into the high school years, they did science fair. And they did it in a big way. That all of their children, one at a time, would go to the National Science Fair finals. And they just rocked it on the science fair. And I remember one day when we were talking at an event, and she was telling me what all their kids were doing after I'd asked. And I began to feel under the heap and like, we never did science fair. And that was just an hour away. And every year, my husband's a doctor, for goodness sake. I planned to do science fair, but we never did it. But that's okay. Don't try to measure your family's achievement by some other family's focus, because we did other things that her children did not do. And you know what? Our children are ours, and God's call is ours. Don't compare your family's achievement to another family's calling, because that produces guilt and shame, and that is not a healthy way for you as a woman to be able to manage life. You know, I love the verse in Romans 5:2 that says, the grace in which we stand. That is where we have to be. We have to stand in the grace that God has given to us as a woman. And I love that because we exult in the hope of the glory of God. That's why we're doing this, so that our children will have love from a pure heart and a sincere faith, a clean conscience. And that is that hope of God being glorified, not only in my life, but in the life of our children. And we have to keep that focus, ladies, because that is our ultimate goal, is that God all through the way be glorified through our weaknesses and our strengths, because that's the way the Bible is. There's not a character in the Bible that God doesn't reveal both their weaknesses and their strengths. And if you feel like your weaknesses are showing, then God can still be glorified as we, with humility of mind, continue to seek Him and to be faithful day in and day out. Don't forget to stand in the grace of God. Well, I want to tell you what, let's talk about just the importance of being in the Word of God. I don't know about you, but there were a few things that really mattered in my life. And from a young woman, I was committed to doing Bible study. Through college, I was discipled by a woman who just made such an impact on my life. And she taught us the importance and the value of studying and knowing God's Word. And throughout my years as a homeschool mom, I tried to be involved in some sort of women's study, whether that was at Sunday school or maybe one morning a week. That for most of my homeschooling years, and to this day still, I'm involved in women's Bible study, so that I have accountability, that I can say in my mind and my heart, this is important, this matters. And this can be something that is legit, because no matter how important something is to us, sometimes we need a reason to make ourselves stop and do that. So accountability. And so get involved in a women's Bible study. When my children were very young, I did Bible study fellowship. And I've heard that often that some places in the BSF program have enough homeschool moms involved where they do things with older children. Their children's program is excellent, though. I did, when we moved after residency from Kentucky back to Louisiana, where I'm from, then I got involved in Kay Arthur's Precept Bible Study Ministry. And later I taught Beth Moore studies on Sunday mornings in my Sunday school class, or at least she taught and I facilitated. And that I studied for years with Beth. And now I'm involved in Mom Strong International, and I have a group of about 12 young women that I mentor and disciple through Mom Strong International. On a weekly basis, I meet with a lot of young moms, maybe like you, that are a few of them homeschool, most of them not, at my church. And Mom Strong International is something that you can get involved in. It's through Heidi St. John's ministry, and it's a great study. Get involved in a study. I could always tell when I had been 3 or 4 days not in the Word, not getting my perspective adjustment, not having someone pour back into me through the Holy Spirit, then I could see it in my attitude. I would just get unpleasant, let's say, and irritable and easily frustrated with my children. So it is so important for you to continue to have God's love to pour over you, His encouragement to keep on doing the hard work of dying to self every day, of being a servant to your children. Yes, training them to do everything they can do, but especially when they're young, there's a lot they can't do for themselves. And you are serving and loving and giving out all through the day. And I encourage you, Mom, to be in the Word of God. These things are a fearful deal. And with my children, have you ever thought, maybe I'm going to ruin my children? And when we were homeschooling, we didn't have 2 generations ahead of us homeschooling. We didn't know. It was just an experiment. It was something that we did by faith. But guess what? You're still doing it by faith. It doesn't matter how many homeschoolers have scored above average, well above average on their testing, gone to college, successfully gotten great jobs, and are now providing for their families and homeschooling themselves. It's still your children. And maybe somebody else could do it, but maybe you can't. This is a fearful journey, and one that you have to constantly be turning over to God within your heart and within your spirit and say, God, you've called me to do this. You will equip me to do this, to be able to go from being closed and fearful to being open-hearted and trusting, to be even maybe able to walk in joy in what God is calling you to do. We want God to replace Satan's lies in our spirit to where we believe what God says about us and not what Satan says. He comes to lie, kill, steal, and destroy your joy and your purpose, and you have to replace those lies with the truth of what God says about you, that you are His child. Nothing can separate you from His love, and He wants to replace your fear with faith and with peace. In John 14:7, He says, my peace I leave with you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be fearful, because I am with you. John 14:27, God is not a God of confusion, but of peace. You don't want to be like one who is unstable in her ways, tossed to and fro by the waves of the various current philosophies and of what's going to happen to your kids and why it's wrong. Right now, there's a big thing from Harvard saying, homeschooling is terrible for your children. Well, that's a bunch of malarkey. There are facts that prove that that is not true. When I was homeschooling, there weren't hard data that shows that this works no matter your educational level, no matter your financial capacity, that this homeschooling concept of you tutoring and caring for your children, it works. Do not let there be confusion in your heart, but that of peace, confident of God's calling. I remember, especially when mine were about to go into the junior high phase, I kind of hit a wall, and I began to think, well, maybe I should put them in school because, I'm pretty unorganized. I am so fly by the seat of my pants, or we're not covering it all. And as I began to truly evaluate my why am I doing this? What do I want for my children? I began to think about the kind of person that I wanted them to be. And guess what? I liked my children. I was beginning to see glimmers of hope, of the character and of dependability, of passion, of the confidence and the joy in their lives, their ability to communicate with others, their love for God. And I thought, in comparison to their friends in their youth group, not just in public school, but at their youth group, I really like my children. And God gave me the confidence to keep on going to homeschool my children. And my husband ratcheted up his involvement in their education, and God provided a way. But don't let Satan steal your peace and to cause confusion in your heart. Yeah, it matters. It's a big deal. 1 Corinthians 15:10 gave me part of that hope and that confidence, is that by the grace of God, I am what I am. Whether it's true that I get distracted or that I'm unorganized or that I want to do more than is at all possible, that's who I'm, the mother that God gave to my children. And by the grace of God, I am what I am. But you know what? I serve the great I am. He is the God of glory. And just like He told Moses, you can accomplish what I've called you to do because I am. You stand in that grace and in the confidence that God will accomplish His purposes in and through you with the children that He gave you. It's a long-term investment. And it's going to start off small, where you feel like that all you're doing is wiping their nose and wiping their bottom. But moms, it matters. What you're doing matters. And stay with that long-term investment, because you will grow with them. I remember that feeling when mine were all young and 7 and under. And I had a friend that was going to seminary. And one day I called and I said, "How's your day going?" And this was like 8:30 in the morning. And she rattled off all that she had already done. And I was overwhelmed. I just thought, oh my goodness, if I get to exercise and do my devotions and have breakfast and clean up the house, and that would have been a successful day to me. That I had gotten a lot done. And we're talking 8:30 in the morning. But now by the time you love on 4 children, you get them up and dressed and fed and do the conflict the conflict, resolving that conflict that's already occurred, you've had a good day. But I promise you, ladies, that later they'll be able to get themselves up and dressed. They'll be able to even fix their own breakfast. And the investments that you make of teaching all the small things when they're young, it grows and it comes back. You grow in your capacity to manage many, many things. So many homeschool moms, I say, they could run a corporation, and based on all the fact that what they do with their children, you will grow, and your children are a long-term investment. Do not get discouraged. So we talked about you as a woman and your spiritual life. What about your physical life? One of the mistakes that I made as my children entered the very busy phase of that late elementary and junior high phase, where they were playing baseball. They were, the older two were involved in a play at the community theater. And we were building a house. Oh my goodness. It was such a busy time for me. And I remember thinking that I needed to not play tennis that spring. And that was okay. But basically, I decided that I should sacrifice exercising. This is one thing that I regret. Moms, your physical self matters, and you have a lot of demands on you. And before, I had always been committed to losing weight and getting in shape after each baby. Well, after that fourth child, that was my last baby, and I gained weight during building the house, and I never lost it because I had decided that my luxury of going to the gym or doing my exercise through playing tennis and other things, that was something I enjoyed so much that I needed to sacrifice that. I felt selfish in taking that time. But guess what, moms? That's important. Even if you simplify, maybe you can't be a part of the tennis league, but you can take a child and walk. Even if you have one in the stroller and others on their bicycle, you can take maybe the baby in the stroller and leave the older ones with an activity that they're safe enough at home by themselves for the 30 or 45 minutes that you're going to go walk. So you find some way of making it happen, even if it's switching off with a neighbor's children or a friend that she comes by and she watches your children for a while, reading stories while you walk, and then she does what she needs to do. Make it happen. But your physical self is important, not only your spiritual self. And so make some time to take care of that part of who you are. Ladies, your sleep is another important factor. You know, maybe you've got a project going that you had to stay up late several nights in a row. Then find a way, switch off with your husband so that you can get some catch-up sleep at some point. Your sleep is important. Getting yourself on a regular routine of saying that after 8 o'clock, no screen time, so that you don't find yourself on Facebook at midnight and where did the time go? You meant to go to bed by 10:30 or something like that. Be careful with your sleep time and make that a priority. Now, the emotional self of who you are, it matters. Your good nutrition, time around the table with your children, it is such a valuable thing. And I encourage you to find ways, even if it's very, very simple things, find ways to have good, healthy snacks and good, healthy food. And this matters for your children. It will help your own sanity because they will be better if they're not high on sugar all the time and crazy. And it will help your health so that you have good nutrition. You also need time with friends, not every day, and you can't have some people need more time with friends than others. Let's put it that way. Some of us are more social and need more interaction. And I encourage you to find ways to still journey on this homeschooling section with others. Maybe you're doing a lab or something that you can do in conjunction with other people. Community service. We did our community service through 4-H. And it was such a fun time with a few other homeschool moms and their kids. And we would go to the nursing home or to the Council on Aging. One year we did Head Start, and we did puppet plays. One of our moms was an artist, and she helped the kids make puppets. We would get together and make puppets. They wrote a play, and we did it for Head Start. Find ways to be in community with friends, and so it makes a difference for the emotional health. So you as a woman, that your spiritual health, your physical health, and your emotional health will make you a stronger homeschool mom and give you the endurance needed to be there for the long haul with your kids. Take care of yourself. Another thing that's important is to take care of your marriage. I'm here to tell you that this is the top priority, more important than homeschooling, is your marriage. One of the children's major fears is that they will not be able to have a long-term, loving relationship. Pattern that for your children. I love the saying that says that a man marries his greatest cheerleader. Like in the picture at the top. You believe in him, you love him, you support him, and then you get married and he wakes up to his chief critic. All those things that you thought were so wonderful about him, sometimes they can begin to irritate you. And I encourage you, Mom, work on your marriage on a regular basis and be involved in placing a high value on that marriage. Our need is for security and for love. And often we want them to meet that need. We need to feel loved. We need to feel cherished. And they don't meet that need sometimes. Maybe they're so busy working when in those early years of your marriage, he's trying to establish his business and his career, and you're having babies and sleep deprivation, and it is just a hard phase of life, and you begin to grow apart. Work on that. Give him validation, because the reason he's working so hard is for you and for your children, to give you the things you want and need. And sometimes we inadvertently say things that make them feel like they need to work harder. We make comparison with a friend that has more than we do, and we express frustration on things that we don't have. He hears that as criticism. Respect your husband. And if you feel like that you are respecting him, I encourage you to ask him. I remember one time at a homeschool conference, we were challenged as women by the speaker to talk with our husband and ask him, is there some way that you feel disrespected by me? And to be really open-hearted toward that. Open your heart toward your husband and see if you're willing to really hear what he says. I was shocked because I already knew this concept. We had read Love and Respect. I knew this was important, and I thought I was respecting my husband. But guess what? There were some ways that I wasn't. I was causing him to feel disrespected in some things that could change. One of those things, he said, is that when he was talking with his mother on the phone, usually when I would encourage him to call and talk with his mom, he would feel like I disrespected him. And I said, in what way? He said, you take over the conversation. And I thought about it. I remember thinking, wow, I am often frustrated when we are talking with your mom that you just stop talking and even hang up the phone. And he said, that's because you took over the conversation. And so that was an easy fix. When he would call and talk to his mother, I would not get on the phone so that I didn't take over the conversation without realizing it. I am more verbal than he is. And so I could talk with his mother anytime. We had a good relationship. After years of trying to understand each other, we finally really had a great relationship, and she was invaluable to me. My mother died when I was 18, so she was both my mother and my mother-in-law. And but I wanted I wanted Roger to have a good relationship with his mom as well. And so I just would not get on the phone. We were able to resolve that frustration of an ongoing basis by me just making a simple change. Another thing he said is when I made overnight decisions regarding the children without asking him, and like whether they could go over to someone's house or something. Maybe he had plans that I didn't know about. So I never made a decision about an overnight arrangement without talking to him first. That was, again, an easy fix. But there are some ways that you may be showing disrespect to your husband without realizing it. Talk to him about it, because he is trying his best to do what's needed for your family, and we need to affirm him in that role as provider and as father to the children. Often they don't do it just right. Maybe you want him to be a spiritual leader, and yet when he makes an effort at doing a devotion, you put your 2 bits in or give some sort of slight criticism like, it was good, but, and then you add something to it thinking you're just helping him, and yet you find he stops doing devotions. This was what was happening in our home, and I realized I needed to be completely quiet. Any effort that my husband made at teaching the children, there needed to be zero criticism, only positive. Now, do I think he should have been more mature and able to hear my input? Yeah, but guess what? That wasn't the case. And he needed strictly positive. And over the years, as I continued to affirm him, he began to do regular devotions in the morning with the children that helped give me accountability of us getting up and starting school before he left. And he would read aloud at night while I was washing the dishes when the children were young. And we would all cheer. And it just became a wonderful family ritual of Dad reading aloud at night. And so find some way of including your husband and praise him, respect him, and encourage him, and be very, very careful about any criticisms. When homeschooling is over and your children are grown and gone, they've gone to college, your husband will be what you have left. And he is the most important thing, because you will have years. We're in the empty nest years right now, and we have had some fun now. I'm telling you, so many things that we didn't get to do, like this porch that I'm sitting on right now. I remember there were years where I thought, why did we even add porches to this house? We never sit on them. Because from 7 to 8, we were sitting around the table doing devotions. Whereas now, from 7 to 8, that is our quality time. In the spring and in the fall especially, Roger and I will sit on the porch with our coffee and our Bibles, listen to the birds. You know you're getting older when you sit on the porch and watch the bluebirds in your front yard. We have many, many bluebird boxes, and it's a joy. There's life after homeschooling. And you want it to be with your husband. Don't lose connection with him. And then, this is a talk about homeschooling, because these things matter for you as a teacher. Those things for you as a woman and as a wife, they give you the strength and the capacity you need to be able to teach your children. Now, maybe you have teenagers, but maybe I've caught you early, and I wanted to let you know those first 5 years are so important. All the experts agree in the importance of those early years, the training they receive. Roger and I always say, you pay now or you pay later. If it's not cute at 12 when they say no and run away, then shouldn't be cute at 2. When they do those things. So be diligent. Be diligent when no one's watching, when it seems insignificant and you give them an instruction and they don't do it. It will pay dividends if you continue to train and teach, give consequences when they're young. because it will make your life so much easier as they grow and later. Now, the first thing that happens is that you need to understand that all of life is school, even when they're little. All of life is school. And that what I mean by that is that when you're learning, whether that's putting on their clothes that morning, that's part of their school. Whether it's training them to put their plate and their bowl in the sink, that is part of learning life responsibility. When they get older, we used to do, instead of having them write a book report, we would do often book reports on horseback. We would saddle the horses. We lived in the country by that time. We were in town when they were little, and we had horses, and we would saddle, and I would hear about what book they were reading on horseback, and what did you think about that? What character did you like best? What were you challenged by in this book? What would you have done, change differently if you were writing the story? Those kinds of things. And just share life together, talk. Conversation is part of school. In those early years, you need to establish authority. And that's what I was saying. When no one's watching and no one else is around, you make sure that they're obeying you, because the dividends that you will reap later are so important. The not having every single thing be a fight is important. Establish the authority that you have in the home while they are young, and get organized. Like I say, this is something that I struggle with, and that is my organization. I am not by nature an organized person. My husband has had to help me develop systems. And when I went, I guess my youngest son was first grade, one of the first conferences that Louisiana had for homeschoolers, I went to a workshop on organization and getting organized, and the lady shared some few simple things that I would say over and over. They became my mantras as I began to get organized in my homeschool. A place for everything, and everything in its place. Now, some of you came out of the womb like that. You need everything to have a place. I don't think like that. That does not come to me naturally. And so something as simple as your keys. Do you know how frustrating it is to spend time looking for your keys or your purse? Where did I put my purse? When we were designing our new house, that's the first thing we talked about, is where is my purse going to go? Because Roger knew that I needed a set place in those kitchen cabinets for my purse to go, so that I would know every time we'd get ready to leave the house that I didn't have to worry about where is my purse. So a place for everything and everything in its place. That includes your school books, and make it where they're accessible. They don't have to be perfect, but it does need to have a place. Later, maybe at first you start doing school in a very particular place, but as your children grow, they're going to be doing school all over the house, in their bedroom, on the couch, in the kitchen table. You know, we started off with a schoolroom, and when they were young, we would manage that. But later, we needed to spread out more. And so have a set place, though, that no matter where they are with their school materials, that they pick those things up and it goes back to its place. I had a saying, don't let it leave your hand until it reaches its home. That everything had a home. And I remember having something in my hand and just like, that I can't set this down to go do something else. I've got to walk all the way through the house to wherever its home is, and then go ahead and put it down in its home. Whether it's taking off my shirt and I would want to drop it on my closet floor. And I have a big closet now. But I just remember saying, no, it can't leave my hand until it's in its home. And I would put that hanger on it and hang it in the closet. Things I was trying to teach my children, I had to teach myself. I was that high schooler that you couldn't walk on my floor without walking on clothes. I was very, very busy. I'm a cleric personality. I'm achievement oriented, and I didn't realize those things then. I just knew I felt I was too busy to hang up all those clothes. And So I had to train myself as an adult, as a married woman, because I married while we were in college, and I had to train myself new habits that while I was training my own children, I was training myself as well. Don't let it leave your hand until it reaches its home. You can rotate toys by stowing some away. Put it in a bin, go through and separate. If you've got two types of blocks, put one set away. If you've got any duplications like matching games and other things, put away some of the dolls, put away some of the trucks and the cars. So you put those in a bin and you store them, and so that there's less mess, because sometimes they're in that phase where they're dumping everything out, and that's the game, just dumping everything out. There's less to dump, there's less to play with, less choices to make, and then you put away those that are out that they're currently playing with. You take out the toys that they've been put away, and they have new toys, and put in the things they've been playing with. Put those up for a while and rotate your toys. And that somehow makes things fresh and new. And kids forget that, oh, I love this thing. And then they play with that new thing for a while. Some simple strategies for getting organized. Like assign each child a cup for the day. Or assign each child a color that's their color of plate, bowl, and cup. That every time it's time to set the table, people know where they sit. They know what cup. They're not going to be fighting over it and say, that blue cup, I had that blue cup. That's his brother's cup. So there are some simple things like that that can simplify the number of fights that are had over just things that do not matter. Or the same child, every time he comes in the kitchen, that he gets a different cup. And you have 5 cups per child on your counter. No. Assign your child a cup and let them be happy. There's some basic things that can simplify your life. Now, the curriculum that you choose, there's not one right curriculum, but you do need materials. You need books. Whether you are teaching as a unit study, you need reference books. If you're using a set box curriculum, then that's an important thing. But realize you don't have to do every problem on every page. You do not have to say everything in the teacher's manual that it says, say this. Maybe your child already understands it, and you need to just skip that whole lecture and see whether they can do all of that work. Simplify your life in whatever it is, and know that your curriculum is a tool. It is not a master. It does not dictate your day. And if you've got interruptions where somebody dies and you have to cook a meal for that, and you include your children in that process, or you've got a parent that you're having to care for as they age, or maybe they got sick in some way, so many interruptions come into our life that you have to work with in life. Make sure that you do not feel guilt and under the pile because your curriculum said that you needed to do this many lessons. Adapt your curriculum to fit your life. You need to be faithful in doing school every day. And, I say every day, I'm talking about as a regular routine. Get up and have a routine. Be committed to school, but make sure that there are times that you can take off. Say, this week we're taking off because this is happening in our lives, and so we're just going to take off and we're going to double up another time. So don't feel like you have to finish every book. My husband has a medical degree, and he says he's never finished a book in his life. And I don't even remember in mine. I just felt frustrated by most of my education. And I love learning, but don't let the curriculum drive you to a point of frustration. Be committed to learning, but know that your curriculum is a tool. It is not your master. So whatever you do, ladies, you do it all for the glory of God. Whether you're cooking, whether you're reading aloud a book, that it all matters. It's all important. And so I encourage you, reading aloud, make all of life a journey. All of life is school. Be fascinated with what is outside. Learn from nature. Make sure that the kids are not in front of a video game or the TV all the time. Don't feel like that you have to have an expert. You know, a video teacher may be something you use one year when you're stressed. It may be something you use every year, but it may be something you choose not to use because it's limiting. It limits the child's time. And, you know, there are so many options and ways of doing school. Don't let fear drive your decisions. Talk with your husband. Talk with your children about what they want to learn, how they best learn. Spend some time evaluating the different approaches, the teaching styles, learning styles, and choose something that's good for your family. Maybe you pick and choose reference materials and you do unit studies. Maybe you choose Ambleside online that's for free and you use a Charlotte Mason approach one year. So try different approaches and come up with something that fits who you are as a family, that works with your children. I had a struggling learner and a child that was advanced that was right behind him. And your children, they learn at different paces. Don't base it on their age, but where they are emotionally and mentally, what they're ready for. And I remember that when my youngest child was 15 or 14, he was a freshman at the end of his freshman year, and the son above him had graduated. It's demanding having a senior, and I felt like, oh my, I have just neglected this youngest son. He was a voracious reader. He loved to read. He was a very content child, and I said, I want you to go ahead and take the ACT this year. In the South, we take the ACT. Maybe you take the SAT or a different standardized test for a college entrance exam. And so he took that test and he scored extremely high. And I was just amazed by God's faithfulness in what this child had learned by osmosis and by reading and picking up what we were teaching with the older children. And his response to his score was, wow, Mom, just imagine what I would have made if we'd ever done school. Now, you can imagine how that made me feel. But, you know, the proof is in the pudding. And I said, if you can do this well, I think he had a 26 on his ACT after his freshman year. And that's considered high enough to be in the highest scholarship ranks for Louisiana. And he ended up scoring much better than that and getting a full scholarship to our university and is now an electrical engineer in Houston with his family. But that was the one that I was neglecting and feeling like we are so behind. And so I encourage you, be faithful, trust God, do your best to seek His glory, and you're in the faithful service of your family, and trust God for the results. He said, if you seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, then all these things shall be added to you. You don't know the stories that I have heard from friends that spent the year caring for a parent, or the year like I did when we built the house. And my oldest son, I just said, we lived in town close to the library, and he would finish one book, and I told him, you can go to the library and check out the next book anytime you want to. And he would hop on his bike, run down to the library, come home with the next book, and he made it his challenge personally to read all the Newbery books that year. Now, he didn't quite make it. I told him it wasn't worth it. There were some that he just wasn't interested in. I said, life is too short, but read all you can. And his scores just jumped dramatically that year, and I had nothing to do with it. So there are times when you feel like nothing's being accomplished, but it is. Your goal is to do the very best that you can, to love your children, to love your husband, and to be faithful at home. You know, that's what it says in Titus, that we as older women are to teach you, the younger women, to love your husband, to love your children, and to be faithful at home, that the word of God not be dishonored. God will glorify Himself through you if you confidently stand in the grace that He's given you. Keep it up, Mom. As a woman, as a wife, and as a teacher, you can learn to manage the fear that Satan throws your way in the midst of your faithfulness and in the midst of the chaos that surrounds you. Learn some principles, tame that chaos, but yet know that there's just a certain volume of activity and conflict and chaos that's going to occur during your homeschool years. Learn to be content among some of that activity and to trust God that He is faithful, regardless of how you feel about yourself. May God bless you in this journey, and I hope that you will be encouraged to remain faithful in homeschooling your children. You will be thankful you did when they are grown and they love each other, they love you, and that they love God. Trust God for those results as you faithfully school your children. Good luck. From Louisiana, this is Jan Smith.